Whenever I give a check, let's say from my bank to Prince's bank, they're going to clear the funds on a daily basis. But unfortunately, that money is literally going to take 2 or 3 days for it to go from one bank to another. But they've already cleared the funds. How is that possible that they're already allowing you to use money that they haven't received? Well, they use something called the money market. And a money market account is money that is invested by their clients. And it is money that allows the bank to do its daily transactions. Now, the interest rate on a money market account really isn't that high because they're not locking anything in. It's just daily transactions. Now, if they were to lock in your money, they're going to offer you something called a CD, a certificate of deposit, which states that they're going to hold your money for 6 to 12 months. And in that time, they're going to use that money to lend it to other people in the form of credit cards, in the form of student loans, car loans, other things that they need for their transactions. Now, what happens in that case is your money's locked in for 6 or 12 months, and they've already negotiated with you what interest rate they're going to pay you. The problem is, if for whatever reason you have an emergency and you need to pull money out of that CD, you've gone ahead and forfeited the negotiated interest rate that they were going to pay you at the end. Now, there's some CDs that last 120 months. I don't know about you, but if I'm going to lend a bank my money for 10 years, can you please give me more than 0.15% in interest? Right? So, next one, Prince. So then they take your money, and we skipped one. So then what happens is they take your money and they lend it to other people in the form of a mortgage, a car loan, a student loan, credit cards. Now, if you notice, the rates that they are receiving for lending your money to others is significantly higher than the interest that they're charging you. And that's why if you ever walk into a bank, they're usually beautiful. They usually have, nice wood and leather and marble. Well, that's because they're making all the money off of lending your money to other people and taking the spread of the money that they're lending. So, next one. So now let's talk about mortgages. So let's say Prince decides that he wants to buy a house. So the first thing he's going to do is he's going to go to a bank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Rocket Mortgage. It doesn't matter where he goes to. And what's going to happen is they're going to take an application, and more often than not, they're going to ask for the application to meet certain guidelines, Freddie Mac guidelines, Fannie Mae guidelines. And the reason why they need that loan to meet that guideline is because if they lend $500,000 to Prince, that's $500,000 they do not have available to lend to someone else. So what happens is these loans have to hit a guideline because what they're going to do is once they have give me 1 second. Once they have several loans, they're going to go ahead and jumble them together and they're going to sell it to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. But those loans have to hit that guideline. And then what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac does is they go ahead and take those loans and they offer it to the investment world in the form of a collateralized debt obligation. So what happens is the investor is receiving interest, the average interest rate that Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac is collecting off of this bundle of mortgages that they purchased from Bank of America. So what happened is now Bank of America has the $500,000 that they lent to Prince because they sold it to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have the $10 million that they spent for that big bundle because they sold it to the investment world. So again, it was an issue of lending the money to other people. Next slide. So now let's talk about stocks. So in layman terms, a stock in essence is an ownership of a company. You are a partial owner of a company. Now, what ends up happening is depending on what type of stocks you have, okay, you may have some voting rights, you may have other rights, or you may just have just a standard ownership where you're entitled to dividends. Dividends are the profits that are realized by the company that are paid out to its owners on a quarterly basis, right? Next. Now, the opposite of that is a bond. So, for example, if Jeff Bezos right now needed $100 million to create a distribution center, he's got one of two options. He could either issue more stock in order to generate revenue, or he could issue a corporate bond. And in essence, he says, hey, Prince, look, if you lend me $100,000, I'm going to hold this money for 5 years and I'm going to pay you 5% every year. And at the end of the 5 years, I'm going to give you back your 100,000. Now, in a stock, you're an owner. Now, what happens is if the company goes bankrupt, you lost your $100,000 investment. As a bondholder, you're a debtor. So if the company goes bankrupt, you're entitled to your 125,000. Now, if the company does incredible and flourishes, guess what? You're only entitled to your 125,000. These two things have inverse relationships to each other. Because if the company stock is doing very well and you had the option to buy a stock or a bond, what option would you choose? Wouldn't you want to buy the stock? So if the stock is rising, then what happens is they have to sell the bond at a discount in order to entice people to want to buy that bond. So when the stock market goes up, bond market goes down. When the stock market goes down, the bond market goes up. Like a teeter-totter. Next slide. So then there's something called a mutual fund. So mutual funds were created back in 1924. And what it is rather than you investing in one company, a mutual fund allows you to diversify and invest in numerous companies. Usually a mutual fund has anywhere between 70 to 300 different companies. And they're companies you recognize like Starbucks, Walmart, Toyota, Verizon, a bunch of different companies in a bunch of different industries. So that in case something happens to one particular company or one particular industry, you're protected. Now, what happens is all these mutual funds have a professional money manager where his job is to pay attention to all these companies. So, in case something was to happen to one particular company or one particular industry, he's going to move your money around. Now, keep in mind that his compensation is based on the efficiency and velocity of your money growing. So, he's motivated to make sure your money grows. And since 1924, the average mutual fund has had an average rate of return of over 12%. The oldest mutual fund in existence is one called the MFS Massachusetts, that's been around since 1924, has had an average rate of return of 9.24. The second oldest one is one called the Pioneer Fund, that's averaged over 12% since 1924. Next slide. Then there's these things called annuities. An annuity is an investment with a built-in insurance product. What is the insurance of it? Well, guaranteeing that you get a paycheck or protecting your money against litigation. So what happens is, let's say you have a lump sum of money and you want to receive a monthly income and you want to make sure the money doesn't run out. Well, you could put your money into an annuity and an annuity gives you a guaranteed paycheck for life so that even if the money runs out, the institution has an obligation to pay you even though you outlasted your money. Okay? Now, annuities usually are designed to do one of two things, either protect your money or distribute your money. And what I mean by protecting is in the state of Florida, there's actually something called Florida Statute 222.14. I don't know if you guys have ever realized why all the wealthy criminals moved to the state of Florida. Well, the reason why that is because in the state of Florida, any money that's in a life insurance product or an annuity product is protected against litigation. So that's why when all of these people do civil lawsuits against them, they're not able to touch their money because their money is safely tucked away into an annuity. Next. Guys, if you have any questions as I go on or go through, feel free, Prince, to
Go ahead and
direct
put
traffic.
questions into the chat, and at the conclusion, we'll answer all your questions to the best of our ability. We'll even stick around a little longer for the questions that we may not be able to answer within the time frame.
Now, there's three words when we're talking about investing that people hear, but they really don't understand: aggressive, moderate, and conservative. And when they hear these words, they automatically correlate it with risk. But believe it or not, aggressive, moderate, and conservative has nothing to do with the amount of risk you have in your investments. What it has to do is with what relationship do you have in your investments between stocks and bonds. Because remember, stocks and bonds have an inverse relationship to each other. So having an aggressive portfolio, you may have 100% in stocks, 0% in bonds, or you have no counterbalance. Now, here's the thing, guys. When you're in your 20s and your 30s, you could ride a jet ski all day long, right? Because your stomach, your back, your body can handle the ups and downs. But as we get older, we got to trade in that jet ski for a 40-foot contender. Why? Because if the ocean's bad, I don't want to feel the ups and downs as much, right? So we get a little more moderate. And then right before retirement, we got to trade in that 40-foot contender for a cruise ship. Because what's the beautiful part of a cruise ship? I don't care how bad the ocean is. I don't want to feel it. Okay? So aggressive, moderate, conservative has to do with what relationship you have in your investments between stocks and bonds. How much counterbalance do you have in your investments? Now, there is risk. Next slide. That goes into investing. Okay? And let's talk about that. If you guys have ever heard of the word cap, large cap, mid cap, small cap, that refers to capitalization. It refers to if the companies were to buy back all of their outstanding shares, how much are they worth? Okay. Now, there are tiers of caps. So, starting at the top, a mega cap is a company whose value is above $100 billion. Disney, Amazon. I'm pretty sure if Facebook's not there, it's almost there, right? Your large cap companies would be between 10 to 100 billion. Your mid cap companies between 2 to 10. Small cap, 500 million to 2 bill. I don't know about you, but the word small and 500 million to me feels like an oxymoron. But when you're talking about publicly traded companies, yeah, it's small. Now, even riskier than that, you have international companies. Why is international companies riskier than small companies? Because when you're dealing with international companies, you have to deal with politics, the exchange rate of money. Is the president getting along with the prime minister of that country? There's a lot of things that go into it, not just the health of the company you're invested in. Then there's something called emerging markets. Whenever you hear the word emerging markets, I want you guys to remember the word BRICS, BRICKS. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, Korea, and Saudi Arabia. So you're investing in these 5 countries. And then the riskiest of all is sector funds. If you told me, hey, Rick, I want to invest just in petroleum, and tomorrow somebody comes out with a free hydroelectric car, what's going to happen to the petroleum industry? You're screwed. So if you invest in just one portion of the economy, you're opening yourself up to the risk that that portion of the economy can cease to exist. So that's on the stock side. Now let's talk about the bond side. Again, a bond is an income or a debt, right? So who has the highest risk of defaulting on their loan? Well, a person with their mortgage, right? So real estate is the riskiest. Then you have corporations. Corporations can default, right, by going bankrupt. Then you have municipalities, cities, and counties, right? Then you have governments, US government, Canadian government. There's a higher probability of a municipality going bankrupt than an actual government going bankrupt. And then you have cash, right? So that right there is your levels of risk inside of your investments. Next slide. So let's talk about stocks versus mutual funds. So let's say you decided you want to invest money. Most people say, hey, you know what? I want to invest in the stock market. Great, awesome, wonderful. Now, usually when you're investing in the stock market, and let me be clear, I understand that there are some platforms that allow partial share purchases. But normally in the stock world, in order for you to purchase a share of a stock, you have to purchase a full share. The buying and selling has to be done by you. So what happens is if you get out of work at 6 o'clock in the afternoon to make the trade, but the problem happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're way behind the ball, but you're the one doing the buying and the selling. The number of shares only increase if you buy more shares. Dividends are paid out quarterly. There are no capital gains because capital gains are the profits that are created by the buying and selling of shares of companies inside of a mutual fund, which doesn't happen in a stock. And the ways your investment grows is either the number of shares goes up and down, right? Or the value of each share goes up and down. Now, in a mutual fund, it is very common for you to be able to buy partial shares. So you could invest in a mutual fund as low as $25 a month. You're buying minuscule shares, but you can still do it as low as $25 a month. The buying and selling is done by a professional money manager. So it doesn't matter that you got home from work at 8 o'clock at night. If they were made aware of something that needed to happen for a trade to occur, they took care of it because don't forget their compensation is based on the velocity and efficiency of your money growing. The number of shares, well, every time there's a dividend or a capital gain, it's reinvested, so they buy more shares. And in a mutual fund, there's 4 ways for your money to grow. The number of shares you have, the net asset value or the value of each share, your dividends that are reinvested, and your capital gains that are reinvested. Where in a stock, there's only 2 ways: the number of shares you have and the value of each share. Next. Now, mutual fund. So I know it's a little small here, but imagine you invested $10,000 into a mutual fund. Remember that there is income or the capital gain, the dividends, and the capital gains, the dividends. Now, what happens is whenever these profits are realized, they're reinvested and they buy more shares. So in this particular example, an initial investment of $10,000 purchased a person 1,238 shares. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, the initial investment stayed as $10,000. However, by the end, they had 4,239 shares. Why? Because there were dividends and capital gains that were realized, reinvested, and that $10,000 initial investment, after 22 years, grew to $47,000 without the person investing another penny. Because again, dividends and capital gains reinvested. So although the mutual fund started at $7 a share and ended at $11 a share, which realistically stayed the same. That's just inflation growth. What made the money grow was the reinvesting of the dividends and the capital gains. Next. Right. So no, next one, that is just more of elaboration. So then another thing we have to discuss is dollar cost averaging, right? Where not everybody has an initial investment of $5, $10, $20, $30,000. And the same way you guys do in the cryptocurrency world, you do systematic contributions, right? So in this particular case, if a person did a $5,000 investment at $10 a share, they bought 500 shares. Now, if they were doing systematically and they were putting away $1,000 every month, if the first month the shares were at $10 a share, they ended up getting 100 shares. If the shares went down to 8, they got 125. If they went down again to 5, they got 200. If it went back up to 8, they got 125. And it ended up at 10, so they had 100 shares. Now, in this scenario, after 5 months, it started at $10 a share, ended at $10 a share. And to most people, they think, oh, that was a wash month. But if you pay attention, because of the fact that you were contributing during a down market, you were able to buy more shares for the same price. So rather than having 500 shares in the first scenario, you actually have 650 shares in the second scenario, where at $10 a piece is $6,500. So the 5,000 grew to 6,500 just because of the systematic contributions during the ups and downs of the market. So guys, ups and downs are good if you're systematically contributing to your investment. Next. Now, this is the same scenario, $10,000 invested over 22 years, but rather than doing $10,000 initially, they did $44 a month, right? 10,000 investment. And if you notice, again, dividends and capital gains, everything stayed the same. The only difference is that because there wasn't more initial shares at the beginning, when the companies paid out dividends and capital gains, you were entitled to less because you had less shares of that ownership. Next. One more. So if you look in this scenario, back. So if you look in this scenario, $10,000 investment, but because initially it was done one purchase. They were able to buy 4,269 purchases off the get, which resulted in the investment growing to $47,000. The other way, because of the fact that the investments were done systematically, when dividends and capital gains were distributed, they got less of it. So instead of it growing to 4,200 shares, it grew to 2,200 shares. And because of that, the portfolio only grew to 25,000 instead of 47,000. But if you notice, look, the same investment, the same period of time, outperformed 7.61%, but the return was less because again, it wasn't participating as heavily because it was contributing on a monthly basis. So next.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as it relates to cryptocurrency, understanding the simple fact that because cryptocurrency is not currently regulated, it's important to understand the nature of diversification, right? And understanding how to invest and grow your money also means that if you're taking intelligent ways to manage your money, you can also increase the value of whatever it is that you're investing in whatever form. All right. Now, we hope that you've taken into consideration the rule of 72, not only how it benefits you, but also how it works against you. But understanding more importantly that if you have any challenges with the management of debt, Rick and myself, we can help you do that so that way you can invest more into your own money to make it grow. Now, all this works essentially as an engine, right? The banks are using it. They've got their ways of making money: real estate, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, cryptocurrency. This is all an engine, but these types of engines work best in some type of a vehicle, right? So, Rick, go ahead and touch on this very quickly.
So there's different vehicles that are designed to do different things. So for example, if you want your vehicle to work for purposes of retirement, you have a 401k, a 403b, or 457. Guys, those numbers there are tax codes. That's why they start with 4. 401k means you work for a for-profit business. 403b means you work for a non-profit business. 457 means you work for a municipality. IRA means you're an independent or an individual retirement account. Simple IRA means you're a small business owner with less than 100 employees. A SEP IRA, you're an individual employee. Maybe you don't want to put money away for retirement. Maybe you want to put it to buy a car or a boat or a house. So you have individual accounts, you have transfer of death accounts, right? You have survivorship accounts where if I die, it goes to my partner until they die. Then you have accounts for your minors. Maybe you want to put money away for your kid's college fund. Maybe you think your kid's not going to go to college because he's a built-up entrepreneur, but you still want to give him money. You could set up what's called the UGMA or UPMA, which is called the Universal Gift to Minors account or Universal Transfer to Minors account, which is available to them when they become adults. Or you may want to teach your kid, hey, let's start putting money away for retirement, right? Maybe you're a 1099. You have your kid on payroll. They make like $6,000 a year. So you set them up with an IRA. These are all things for minors. Or maybe you have somebody that is unfortunately mentally handicapped, severe autism, Down syndrome, and they're your beneficiaries. They're not minors, but they're dependent on you. So you could set up accounts for them as well because they need to be able to survive in your absence. Right? Now, as far as how you fund this money, there's 3 ways to fund this money. Now, when we talk about pre-tax and post-tax or Roth, what happens, guys, is the government wants you to put money away for certain things. They want you to put money away for retirement because they need you to have money in retirement. People in retirement account for 1/3 of the gross domestic spending in this country. So they don't need you to be poor in retirement. They need you to be rich, right? So if you're putting money away for retirement, if you're putting money away for college, if you're putting money away to buy a house, there are certain tax benefits that exist. Now, that money can be done where they tax you on the front end or they tax you on the back end. On the front end would be Roth, or on the distribution, it's deferred. And then there's also non-qualified money. The reason why it's non-qualified is because it does not qualify for any IRS benefits. That's why it's called non-qualified. where you do whatever you want with it. But on a yearly basis, you're going to receive a 1099 and you're responsible to pay for the taxes on the growth of the money. If you put in 10 and it grows to 11, you got to pay taxes that year on the $1,000 growth because it's non-qualified. So this is the end of this, guys. As far as the slides are concerned, do you guys have any questions or anything you would like me to elaborate on, discuss? I'm an open book. I'm a teacher.
Well, real quick, Rick, if we could just use the last remaining time to kind of touch on, how can, if someone wanted to use a trust, right? Or, or place their investments into their estate plan, what suggestions would you offer them towards that fact? And what we'll do is we'll finish out on this, but for anyone that's interested, we'll continue with part 2. All you'll have to do is just, when this presentation ends, just go ahead and hit the link and come right back into the same Zoom room. Okay.
So keep in mind, guys, as we're putting money away, the whole purpose of you creating wealth is to create intergenerational wealth. Most people don't understand that the Carnegies, Rockefellers, the Trumps, they made their wealth over many, many years. Everybody knows the story of Donald getting a loan from his dad when he turned 18. But what they don't know is that grandma started investing in the stock market way before, going back to the 20s. But what ended up happening was they created intergenerational wealth. And that's where having a trust goes into it, because it's not just here's my money, but here are the stipulations on how it is that I want you to be able to receive that money. You may say, hey, unless you go to college, you ain't getting this. And now you're going to have to wait till you're 50 or 40 or whatever. So you're doing a very good job in building your wealth, and you want it for your children. But sometimes you've got to, even in your absence, put in guidelines for them so that they don't squander your hard work. So that's where the importance of estate planning comes in.